right, thank you, Harris, and good to be with all of you. And now this Fox News alert as we top a new hour. South Dakota Republican Senator John Thune will be the new Senate Majority Leader. Mitch McConnell's top deputy beating out challenges by John Cornyn of Texas and Rick Scott of Florida.
Thune will speak shortly alongside his Senate Republican leadership colleagues. We will bring you there when it begins. But first, the latest from a big day at the White House.
Former President, thank you. Donald, congratulations.
Thank you.
And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition.
And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today.
All right. Well, that was seen around the world, that handshake in the Oval Office as President Biden and President-elect Trump met there earlier today. Both sides promising a peaceful transfer of power ahead of a closed-door meeting that has now concluded as the transition kicks into high gear. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith in New York. What a big day this is, John.
Certainly is, and that was the roaringest of roaring fires behind them, wasn't it? I'm John Roberts in Washington, and this is America Reports. We expect to hear more in the meeting from the White House press secretary when she briefs reporters in the minutes ahead. It's part of a triumphant return to D.C. for President-elect Trump, who met with House Republicans in Washington before making his way back to the White House.
Meanwhile, the president-elect is powering forward to shape his cabinet, wasting no time announcing several new additions in just the past 24 hours.
Now, Fox News team coverage. Mark Meredith has the latest on Trump's transition process, and Larry Kudlow is here to react.
But we begin with Peter Ducey. He's live outside the White House for us. So, Peter, a lot of activity there today. What exactly happened, do we know so far, behind closed doors in that meeting?
We know that President Trump was here a lot longer than his schedule showed us. Nearly 2 hours on campus. We don't know how much of that was in the Oval Office with President Biden. And the huge group of reporters that was kind of forming a crescent moon shape outside of the West Wing with hopes that Donald Trump would come and give us a readout himself of what happened is breaking up because he decided just to get in the motorcade, head back to Trump Force One. They're going to let the Biden side have the first crack at writing this first draft of history of this historic meeting when Karine Jean-Pierre and Jake Sullivan stepped to the podium any minute now. They told us they wouldn't start until Donald Trump left. He's gone. And the whole part of this meeting that they let cameras in for was short enough. We don't have to clip any of it. This is what happened.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President,
thank you.
Donald, congratulations.
Thank you.
And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need.
And it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Joe.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
This is the first time the two of them have been in the same room since they were on the debate stage together, the debate that wound up forcing Joe Biden out of the race. They have spoken on the phone a few times, including after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And again, we don't know anything about how this went. All that we know is that the two of them were in there longer than we thought, and they had the incoming Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, with the outgoing Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, sitting in. So we will get a lot more information about this, we believe.
We appreciate you for that. Thank you very much. We'll check back in with you soon. John?
In the meantime, President-elect Trump is rapidly assembling his cabinet, announcing a number of new nominees, including Pete Hegseth as Defense Secretary and John Ratcliffe as CIA Director. Mark Meredith live in West Palm Beach, Florida, with more on all of this. Mark?
John, good afternoon to you. The president-elect is moving rapidly to fill some of the most coveted jobs in Washington. As you mentioned, last night, Trump stunned pretty much everybody in Washington by announcing Pete Hegseth, an Army veteran, somebody who's been fighting for veterans' families, as well as a host right here on Fox, to tap the position as the Secretary of the Department of Defense. There are still strong indications Trump is going to select Florida Senator Marco Rubio to be his Secretary of State. Rubio was asked about it today up on the Hill, and he said all questions and announcements announcements need to come from the Trump transition team, so essentially stay tuned. There are also growing questions about what role Tulsi Gabbard, the former Democratic congresswoman from Hawaii turned Trump supporter, may play in a second term. There are rumblings that she's going to have a high-profile role in the intelligence community, but overnight Trump announced his pick for the CIA. That'd be John Ratcliffe. He's now going to be the nominee for CIA director after he's serving in Congress, as well as director of national intelligence in the first Trump administration. Today, Trump also announced that he's chosen 4 of the men who helped lead his campaign to have key positions within the White House. Dan Scavino, Stephen Miller, James Blair, and Taylor Budowich will all be deputy chiefs of staff, but have separate roles focused on communications and legislative affairs. And then, of course, the other big headline, Trump announcing that 2 of his most popular and well-known supporters, that would be Elon Musk as well as Vivek Ramaswamy, are going to lead the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Now, this is something that does not currently exist. This is essentially a whole new idea that Trump is unveiling in his second term, and he says it's an effort to try to cut back some of the bureaucracy that's been involved in Washington, to also see where government waste could be examined. However, it's still a bit murky how it's going to work out, and Democrats are already pointing fun at this, saying they think it's ridiculous that it would take 2 people to figure out which jobs need to be cut in Washington. John.
Yeah, well, we'll see how that works out. All right, Mark Meredith for us. Mark, thanks. Sandra?
All right. Thank you very much, John. And thanks to Mark for that report. Let's bring in Larry Kudlow, host of Kudlow on Fox Business and Trump's former director of the National Economic Council. Actually, I just said on Outnumbered a second ago when we were discussing these new cabinet announcements, like, I haven't heard much on the economy yet and who's leading there. I'm sure you've probably got some inside scoop there. But let me put up on the screen the Trump transition, what we know so far. Okay, these have all grabbed a lot of headlines. Susie Wiles, I know that you have wonderful things to say about her. Chief of Staff Mike Waltz, very familiar face here on the Fox News Channel, National Security Advisor. Lee Zeldin, the EPA Administrator. Steve Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. Okay, I think it's important to go one by one here. Tom Homan, Border Czar. Elise Stefanik, pulled from Congress to be the U.S. Ambassador to the UN. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, his pick for DHS Secretary. Kristi Noem, and Pete Hegseth, about who we just heard, Defense Secretary John Ratcliffe, and beyond. Your thoughts?
Well, he's moving at warp speed, which is, I think, just terrific, because he has so much momentum from his landslide victory in the election a week ago, a little more than a week ago. I happen to think they're terrific appointments. Some of them are really, truly inspired appointments. That includes my friend and your friend, Pete Hegseth. But they're all good. And it's interesting, he wanted to get the border out of the way fast. And he wanted to get the national security out of the way fast. That's very important. The economic stuff's going to come. It'll come very soon, I think. I know a little bit about that, but I'm not going to speculate about that.
How important is it that Senator Thune has just been chosen as the majority leader in the Senate? I mean, this is a guy who knows a lot about energy, coming from South Dakota. Will this help with the energy transition?
Well, I think it'll just help. I mean, John Thune's a good man. He won a good victory. He had a sit down with President Trump not too long ago. I think he'll be a good leader. He'll be a fine leader. I think he's going to run a more open Senate, by the way, in terms of the majority, in terms of amendments, in terms of no big omnibus bills. So we'll have to see how all that plays out. You know, I think there was a part of the news clip with respect to this Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. You know, I wouldn't mock that, okay? I just want to put a flag down on that. We've heard a lot about this in recent weeks. I myself have talked to Vivek quite a bit on our show and off our show. It's not just the 2 of them that are going to grapple with the federal government. They're going to be recruiting a lot of men and women in business and formerly in government to help them out. And one thing, Vivek posted a tweet today on Twitter X, and he said, look, you have 2 things here. Number one, the Chevron deference issue by the Supreme Court, which basically said the regulators do not have the whole say. And he also put in earlier West Virginia versus the EPA, which was the forerunner to Chevron, the same idea. The Supremes have given them a mandate to go through every single regulatory agency and make sure that they have not stepped over their boundaries.
Wow.
And by the way, I think you can generalize and say that in virtually every case, they have stepped over their boundaries, and that has to be curbed. Either you're going to get congressional legislation or they will lose their authority to continue to make these regulations. Furthermore, I happen to know some of those regulatory agencies will be recommended to be off the charts completely. Get rid of them. We don't need them anymore. You're going to try to modernize government. And on top of that, they're going to go through the federal budget with a fine-tooth comb. And again, they're going to use a lot of people power to get this done. You have, for example, at least $1 trillion in programs that were obligated and authorized but not spent out. That's partly the misnamed Inflation Reduction Act.
I mean, when you
That's
talk
the
about
CHIPS
it like
Act.
in these terms, I'm thinking these are huge tasks that they have promised to undertake.
Look, there's even more here. They're looking at, for example, federal assets that could be put into use, leased out for enormous revenues and royalties. I'm not going to go through the specific calculations, but I can just say that federal assets that could be commercialized and leased out for royalties to the federal government are many times larger than the entire federal debt, which is 34.5 trillion. Public hands is about 27 trillion. They're going to mobilize all these resources, all right? Deregulation, get rid of some of these agencies and commissions, get rid of funds that shouldn't be spent anymore. They're not spent out. We
Can
don't
you do
need
this in
them.
4 years?
Yeah. Pardon?
Can they do this in 4 years?
I think they can do it. I think you'll get a rough outline of some of the most impactful things regarding the budget, for example. You'll get it this summer in time for the Reconciliation Act. That's the budget act that'll have taxes and spending in it, which will be sometime in September. This thing is going to hit hard, just like remember, Mr. Trump is a businessman. He likes results, okay? Elon Musk is a hell of a businessman. He likes results. Vivek Ramaswamy, another businessman. He wants results. So I would take this very seriously. And these are regulators and other people inside the federal government. They might want to dust off their resumes because they may be looking for different kinds of work. We might employ them in the private sector, not unemployment, mind you. We might make room for them in the private sector.
Well, I look forward to talking to you through the process, Larry.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks
It's going to be interesting to watch. Alina Habba was talking about all the energy around these picks, and you certainly feel it. It's happening fast, for sure.
Warp speed.
All right. We'll see you at 4 o'clock. Larry, thank you so much. John?
Sandra, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre set to take questions as President Biden hosts President-elect Trump in the Oval Office. Not a lot of action in the Brady briefing room yet, but what will she have to say about that high-stakes meeting?
Plus, FEMA fired a worker for ordering staff to skip Florida homes with Trump signs. But was it an isolated incident? Molly Hemingway's here to react to that former employee's bombshell claims.
This is par for the course, right? We keep having this messaging coming out of these agencies, especially during the Biden-Harris administration, that, there's nothing to see here. All of these allegations that
The docket for this afternoon, we are awaiting the senator from South Dakota, the incoming Senate Majority Leader. He was just elected this morning over John Cornyn and Rick Scott of Florida. So we look forward to that. And as well, at some point this afternoon, we're expecting Karine Jean-Pierre to take to the podium at the White House to talk about the meeting between President Biden and President-elect Donald Trump. So stay with us because we got a lot on the plate. Sandra?
We do indeed. Thank you, John. Outrage, meanwhile, after a FEMA supervisor is fired for ordering her team to skip homes with Trump signs. But that now former employee tells Fox she was just following status quo. Molly Hemingway will react in moments. But first, Madison Scarpino is live from Atlanta. She's got more on this for us. Madison, you spoke to the employee at the center of all of this. What did she have to say?
Well, Sandra, the now fired employee reached out to Fox through her FEMA DHS email that was still activated. She wants to defend herself throughout all of this controversy. She says that she wanted to keep her crew safe, that her supervisor was aware this message was sent, and that FEMA uses loose language while canvassing areas based on community trends.
What we were trending are political hostile encounters, and unfortunately, they just so happen, the majority of them, to have Trump campaign signages. Most of those homes do have other signs that say they will shoot you on sight for trespassing.
Washington claims FEMA skips over homes all the time. She later told a podcaster that she is now fired from her civilian job as well because of all of this. And Sandra, we reached out to FEMA multiple times for an explanation of Washington's claims, but have not received any answers. But the agency says it is investigating this. And on Saturday, FEMA's administrator said, quote, "This is a clear violation of FEMA's core values and principles to help people regardless of their political affiliation. This was reprehensible." Now, this incident is sparking a lot of outrage and investigations among state and federal leaders.
We'll get the answers at some point, but I want to know how high up these decisions went, and every single person in that chain of command that was involved and or responsible for directing people who work for FEMA that to not give FEMA aid to Trump supporters is absolutely atrocious.
And the House Oversight Committee says that FEMA's administrator will testify before Congress on Tuesday, and Washington tells us that she welcomes that. Sandra?
All right, thank you very much. We'll have more on that in a moment. Thank you. John?
All right, Molly Hemingway, Fox News contributor and Federalist editor-in-chief, joins me now. So let's play a little more sound from Marnie Washington, because I think she feels like she's being scapegoated here. Listen to what she said.
FEMA always preaches avoidance first and then de-escalation. So this is not isolated. This is a colossal event of avoidance. Their issue is with FEMA's infrastructure and how they implement duty. It does need to be revamped. It does need restructuring. And it's going to have to start with the truth. No matter who is in that office, there is a problem with FEMA.
So her suggestion is that this isn't a one-off. This was FEMA policy that may have been in place for years.
Right. When this story came out that Trump supporters were not getting help from FEMA because they were Trump supporters, FEMA obviously wanted to just say, this is a one-off, this is one individual, yep. It's not the culture. Well, and you might want to remember the context. When these two hurricanes hit, they hit predominantly Republican voting areas, not just Florida, but in Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. And these were areas where people were already concerned that FEMA might be slow walking the help, or they might be not just as concerned about it as they would be if it were more Democrat constituencies. That was labeled a conspiracy theory without any actual investigation into the claims by corporate media, who said that the worst thing in the world you could do is question how FEMA is doing things. Well, now the story comes out that, in fact, people's fears were legitimate, and it's not just, again, this one person, but an entire culture. And I just want to point out, too, this woman says, we're told not to deal with any confrontation. FEMA deals with disaster response. When people lose their homes, when they have their child ripped from their arms, when family members have died, as happened here, people are going to be stressed out. And FEMA employees, government employees, should be prepared for that type of tension and hostility that they might be receiving, not avoiding it. Probably the people who are most tense are the ones who need the most help.
All right, so we talked to, obviously, dozens and dozens of victims of both Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Here's what some of them told us about relief.
We need people coming to help. Yeah. Families are suffering, and it's time for whoever has the ability to bring in supplies, food, water. There's very little attention, I feel like, being paid for support crews coming in to take care of this.
We just feel like we're being forgotten. Hardly anyone has flood insurance. We haven't received any response from FEMA.
We have not seen anybody other than the one person from FEMA on the ground. It's been local and state.
Remember that famous comment by Deanne Criswell? Just because you don't see us doesn't mean we're not there. And Brian Kilmeade said, well, isn't that the principle of the Holy Ghost? You know?
Yeah.
You might not see me, but I'm there.
Well, in this, it's worth pointing out, too, the Biden administration is not the first administration to have problems with FEMA. Pretty much since it was started under Jimmy Carter, you've seen it be a place where there's a lot of corruption and graft and cronies are put in place. And I think this really speaks to what's happening with this transition as well. The Trump team seems to want to actually improve government programs. If there's a disaster response, they would like it to actually help with disasters and do it in a cost-efficient way. And so these kinds of problems that we saw with these hurricanes really might point to some of the reforms that people will be seeking.
All right, so the Florida Attorney General is incensed about this, that the House Oversight Committee is going to be looking into this. But let me just key on what you said just there, because the Democrats are ridiculing this new DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, headed up by Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, saying, oh, it takes 2 people to find government efficiency. I mean, I think if you're going to get 2 people to look into this, those are probably 2 of the very best people that you can find.
Well, also, we've had decades of Washington, D.C., where they've put tens of thousands of people working on the problem of government waste, fraud, and abuse. And clearly that hasn't done the trick. Having 2 people who are outside the beltway, outside that bubble, looking at things with a completely new approach might be what's needed. It's going to be very difficult to fix these decades of problems in the administrative state with a bureaucracy that is bloated, unaccountable, unresponsive, unelected, and yet thinks that they get to run the country. But if you would put anyone on it, I think Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy might be the 2 best.
You know, remember the Democrats, this is a guy who can catch rockets. I think he can rid out waste, fraud, and abuse.
Exactly.
All right, Molly, good to see you. Thank you. Sandra?
All right, thank you, John. And here's a Fox News alert to 2 live events that we are watching for right now. Screen left, this is the White House press briefing room. Jake Sullivan is expected to speak there, along with Karine Jean-Pierre. As you can imagine, in this moment of transition, there's a lot of questions. We will be listening for that to begin. Screen right, Capitol Hill, where the whip, John Thune, is expected to speak after his election to majority leader. That could begin any moment now. We're listening for that. When that happens, we will go to that live. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, Fox News alert, half past the hour here. 2 live events that we are waiting on at this moment. Screen left is the White House press briefing room. Karine Jean-Pierre set to brief reporters there any moment now, following President Biden and former President-elect Trump's meeting there earlier in the Oval Office. A handshake and a promise of a peaceful transition. We do expect that she will take questions shortly. We'll go to that when it begins. Capitol Hill, seeing some movement. Screen right, we are expecting the newly elected Senate Majority Leader to speak, along with GOP Senate leadership there. That does appear to be the Vice President-elect. Did you see that there, John? We're seeing a lot of movement. It just hasn't been John Thune. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, he's going to be coming out at some point. I was speaking to him just a short time ago, and he is quite enthusiastic about the results of this vote. I'm sorry, what was that? Oh, okay. So we want to just depart this in Washington, D.C. for just a moment. We'll be coming to that very shortly. Meantime, Chicago's mayor vowing to fight back against President-elect Trump. Just 1 week after Trump's decisive win, Mayor Brandon Johnson blasted the future commander-in-chief as a tyrant and a threat. Democratic Chicago Alderman Raymond Lopez is standing by. But first, Garrett Tenney, live in Chicago with the latest on this feud. Garrett?
Yeah, John. Well, Chicago is still a very deep blue city, to be sure. But last week showed that the political landscape here is changing ever so slightly. Donald Trump won more votes than any Republican presidential candidate here in Chicago since 1988 at 21%, which is 9 points higher than he got in 2016. But a big reason that a lot of lifelong Democrats came out for Trump is the border and the migrant crisis they feel Mayor Brandon Johnson has encouraged and even enabled. But the progressive mayor still refuses to acknowledge any missteps in his handling of the migrants and is instead calling Trump a tyrant and a threat to the Windy City.
We're going to defend the people of this city. Because look, his attack, let's be very clear, the president-elect, former President Trump, his threat is not just towards new arrivals and undocumented families. His threats are also against black families. He has a vision to destroy public education.
Black Chicagoans like Kata Truss, who voted Republican for the first time in her life this election because of the migrant crisis, disagree with the mayor and say the defiance that blue city and state leaders are showing suggests that Democrats haven't learned any lessons from the past 4 years.
people have to really be clear about is that a lot of people did not necessarily vote for Trump, but they voted against the Democratic Party. They voted against our Democratic mayor. And I think that the mayor, our governor, and all of our city officials have to understand and need to pay attention to the fact that Chicago voters are not okay with this.
And it's worth noting, while President Trump received 21% of the vote here in Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson is extremely unpopular here. A year and a half into his first term, a recent poll had just 14% of voters saying they viewed the progressive mayor favorably. John?
And yet they elected him. Elections have consequences, I guess. Garrett Tenney for us. Garrett, thank you. Sandra?
So the Senate Majority Leader-elect, John Thune, is expected to speak any moment now. We are told about 2 minutes ago that we're inside the 2-minute window. So anyway, this is still a delay there, despite the Chicago up there. That is Capitol Hill. And we are awaiting Senator Thune to speak shortly. And when he does, we'll go to that. And by the way, just confirm with Chad Pergram that out of the corner of our eye, when we did see what we thought was the Vice President-elect, J.D. Vance, departing through that door, he confirms that it was him. He was there meeting with lawmakers and just left just a few seconds ago. So it is a busy day, to say the least, in Washington on Capitol Hill and the White House. All right, we'll get to Thune when he begins. Meanwhile, Democratic Chicago Alderman Raymond Lopez is joining us right now. Thank you very much for joining us. Back to that report in Chicago on the mayor ramping up the attacks here on the president-elect. Where do you stand on that, and what are your thoughts in this moment?
You know, I think, Sandra, like so many Americans, we need to acknowledge that the election is over. Donald Trump has won, and that he's been given a mandate by the lead with many of the issues that everyday Chicagoans make they are most concerned about, one of which is immigration. And we have seen time and time again where Democratic politicians try to gaslight, pivot, and redirect the attention to what they want to talk about. But the fact of the matter is this, that voters want to know and want to see action on immigration and what they see as the broken immigration system. And I don't think it's hard for many Americans, and particularly many Chicagoans, to say that when you have individuals who are here, whether they are undocumented or whether they manipulated asylum to gain entry into this country and are here in the city of Chicago, that if they break the law, they should be removed from this country. Most people consider that a common sense solution, regardless of where you stand on how they got here. And I think that's what
Well, you say regardless. Regardless, this is Brandon Johnson on his pledge to protect those undocumented immigrants in the city. Listen.
We're going to protect undocumented individuals. We're going to protect black folks, brown folks, Asian folks. Listen, the anti-sentiment that exists in this political space right now is unconscionable and it's dangerous, whether it's anti-black or...
The newly elected Majority Leader of the Senate is now speaking. John Thune, let's listen.
Rejected the failed policies of the Biden, Harris, Schumer agenda. And this Republican team is united. We are on one team. We are excited to reclaim the majority and to get to work with our colleagues in the House to enact President Trump's agenda. We have a mandate from the American people, a mandate not only to clean up the mess left by the Biden-Harris-Schumer agenda, but also to deliver on President Trump's priorities and to remove the violent criminals who are wreaking havoc in every one of our states. We will work to make America prosperous again by streamlining the bureaucratic machine and overturning costly Biden-Harris regulations. And we will work to restore American energy dominance. Not just our energy security, but energy dominance, which will lower costs and bolster our national security. I'm excited to get to work with this team right away. And I want to thank my colleagues who placed their faith in me to serve as leader, and to those who were supporting another candidate. I promise to be a leader who serves the entire Republican conference. We'll have an ambitious agenda, and we'll take each and every Republican working together to be successful. With that, I want to turn things over to Senator John Barrasso, the newly elected Republican whip.
Thank you. On election night, America saw the remaking of the Republican Party for the better now than you were 4 years ago, and the American people said no. only 1 in 4 Americans thought that the country was heading in the right direction. And you've seen the Republican Party grow in terms of hardworking middle-class families, in terms of minorities, in terms of young people, in terms of families struggling to get by. In the last 3 weeks before the election, I was all over the country with President Trump, with J.D. Vance, as well as a number of our Senate candidates. One of the stories that stuck with me was a woman in Michigan who talked about the fact that she was embarrassed to let her husband know that she had to go to the local food bank in order to get by. Republicans listened to those stories. Democrats were focused on President Trump. Republicans were focused on the needs of the American people, people who wanted to get prices down, wanted to secure the border, wanted us to unleash American energy, people who wanted to make America look and be strong once again around the world. That's what the Republicans listened to, that's what we're responding to, and we